Hello and welcome to the Methodical Methodist Podcast, a podcast where we talk about why the church is still relevant for us today as we explore themes connected to religion, politics, pop culture, faith, and yes, even the church. Together we can find out what it means to live into the mission of the church by making disciples. Now, let's get methodical. I'm excited to have one of my favorite people on this earth, my very dear friend, Bolen, on the podcast today. I've known Aaron my whole life pretty much. I was the best man in his wedding, and he is scheduled to be the best man in mine. And I'm excited to have him on to talk about his career in the military, to talk about his faith. We had a really great discussion about how he lived out his faith in college and how he lives out his faith in the military now. I think that you'll find it really interesting and hope that you would get something good out of it. And without further ado, here's my conversation with Aaron Bolen. Hey Aaron, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Hey Andrew, it's my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me here.
Absolutely. We've known each other for a very long time, and I think I've known you pretty much my whole life.
Yeah. Since we were like, what, 6? I think.
Yeah, I don't really remember a time when I didn't know you, but as long as I have known you, you've always wanted to be in the military. And I know your dad was
That is true.
in the Marines, but I wonder, what was it about the military that made you look at it and say, you know what, I want to be a part of that. That's what I really want to do. What was it about the military that really drew you into it?
Yeah, so I think it's a different answer for every kind of phase of my life, and it's just kind of it's divine providence that it's kind of it's been a continual thread throughout my life until now. So yeah, you were right. When I was a kid, obviously my dad, he was a Marine and he was in Desert Storm, so when I was born or whatever, he'd just gotten back, so it was all fresh in his mind. So for the first several years of my life, that was the biggest thing he'd ever done. So naturally, as I, got old enough to where I can remember things, that's one of my first memories, I guess, of my dad is just kind of being in awe and inspired by his service and his stories and what he did. And used to go dress up and pretend to be, in the Marines and go out in the woods and all that stuff. So I think, up until a certain age, it was really just inspired by, my dad, and I thought it was just so cool.
Hmm.
And then as I, started getting older and kind of developing my interests in things, I got really into like how things work. And specifically, I really got into like airplanes and rockets and stuff like that. I don't know if it was movies or if it was like, going to museums
Mm-hmm.
on vacation that had tons of airplanes and stuff. I really don't know exactly what it was. Maybe it was all the above, but I really, really got fascinated with airplanes and how they worked, and the same kind of with rockets. And that's really stuck with me my whole life. That's something I still, just fascinates me. So, as I continued down that road, and I still was, obviously really inspired by my dad's military service and everything. And being into planes, right? The Air Force, I think, has some of the best airplanes. So I was really pumped about, going into the Air Force for the planes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then as I, proceeded on in my, I guess, more mature years, going in towards like high school, and starting to think about, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? And, we got that question, think about it and stuff. And obviously I was really still into kind of engineering stuff and in the engineering profession, and obviously still really into airplanes and rockets and stuff like that. So I kind of thought, the Air Force could really be a potential means to, surround myself and immerse
Mm.
myself in this kind of thing that I'm really, really interested in. And it was purely for that. It was just kind of like that was what I was interested in, and that's kind of what I wanted to do. So I just, picked that and decided to work towards that. And then, my senior year, getting into, engineering school at Tennessee, and then still wanting to do Air Force stuff because again, I wanted to immerse myself. But at this point, that's when I guess my reason started to morph into, the Air Force could potentially provide me not only the means to immerse myself, but also provide me like the means to pay for the school, to have a actual career, to start thinking about life outside of school and
Hmm.
making money and things like that. And so, um, yeah, that's kind of how I got to doing the Air Force ROTC thing, and that's really um, what kicked it off. Because once I joined ROTC in college and really started to get introduced into the what we call the airman concept,
Hmm.
that's when I realized it was much more than just getting to be around all this cool tech and everything. That's it's also a brotherhood or a brotherhood and sisterhood. It's a family, and the wingman concept is something that they teach to us a lot, and I can talk about that later. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So,
so that's kind of
absolutely.
in a nutshell how how uh, how I got at least my start into the Air Force.
Yeah, so I mean that it seems like that interest was always there, and it just kind of developed over time. And you mentioned
Yeah.
going to the University of Tennessee and studying aerospace engineering. I wonder if you might talk a little bit about what that experience was like, and what were some of the highlights of that, but also what were some of the challenges that you faced in pursuing that major.
Yeah, so definitely. I so got my undergrad degree in aerospace engineering from the University of Tennessee, Go Vols. So really, I knew that I wanted to be around airplanes and rockets and things like that, like I said. And growing up, in Cleveland, Tennessee, I didn't necessarily think my options were limited. I didn't think of really going anywhere else. I
Hmm.
knew that University of Tennessee had an engineering program, and they had the aerospace engineering program, and they had Air Force ROTC. So all those boxes were checked, and I was like, "Yep, this is what I want to do." So I applied, and lo and behold, got in. So engineering was simultaneously the best and hardest thing I think I've ever done, and probably will ever do.
Yeah.
I definitely don't think that from a mental challenge standpoint we'll ever have to face something like that again. At least I hope I don't. Um, but through that adversity and through all those challenges, right, I made some incredible friends, made some incredible memories, and I really think that perseverance it took to get through that put me where I am today. So I owe a lot to the University of Tennessee, a lot to the professors, a lot to the School of Engineering. I can honestly say I think because I worked so hard for it, I'm really really proud to claim it as my alma mater. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, obviously it was extremely difficult. Um, I took 5 years. I could have been done in 4.5, but I took that last semester. I only took 6 credit hours that last semester just because I really needed a mental break. At least I
Sure.
thought I did.
Yeah.
Looking back, I don't know if that was necessarily the best thing, but it was great at the time. So,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, so I started out freshman year. I lived on campus all 5 years I was there, which is pretty rare, I think, nowadays. And I had a great experience living on campus through some of the things I was plugged into, like the Baptist Collegiate Ministry and like Air Force ROTC, and working there at the gym called the T-Rec
Oh yeah.
there at the
Yeah.
University of Tennessee. I was, I really tried to immerse myself into a lot of different things, just to kind of get, a broad perspective of what I feel is important in life, and learning what other people feel is important in life, and it was amazing. You obviously learned all about how airplanes and rockets work, which was really great to kind of learn that. But I don't. There's a saying, don't meet your heroes, and I think that kind of applies a little bit here, um,
Hmm.
just because it once you learn it and you practice it over and over again in repetition, and you memorize formulas and memorize how things work and the physics of things and everything like that, you kind of get lost in the whole minutia of it, and you're like, this is I guess this is cool. You kind of lose that, oh my gosh, this is amazing, and it turned into more of like a, yeah, this isn't like this is a normal thing, right? So this is just, there's math, you can prove it, and it's not really that special.
Hmm. So
Um,
it takes like away some of the mystery even.
yeah, yeah, it kind of did.
Hmm.
But then, you can, kind of check yourself and bring yourself back out of that and say, you know what? No, this is really cool. Like, this is amazing. We as humans have advanced so far in such a short amount of time with this stuff. And it's just, yeah, it's pretty amazing. So, I really, again, I enjoyed it, but it was extremely difficult. I'm glad I never have to do it again.
Oh, I can imagine. It seems like one of the more difficult careers to pursue, just because of the some of the classes and the um, things you have to go through to do that. Um, you did mention kind of while you were in college participating in the ROTC there for the Air Force. What was that experience like? Did that kind of affirm your decision to go into the military? Did it raise any concerns, or was that a positive experience for you? What was that like?
So Air Force ROTC was, I think, it's right up there with the Baptist Collegiate Ministry as, I think, the best thing I did. And I mean, again, I owe a lot to it because I am in currently, active duty and am enjoying a very successful career because of it. So,
Hmm.
Air Force ROTC is a means to get a commission in the United States military. So whether it's Air Force ROTC, Army ROTC, Navy ROTC, Marines ROTC, or whatever, people who do ROTC in college, that's their goal, is to get out with their college degree and receive a commission, and be placed in a career field that hopefully they'll love. So, um, that's kind of the spiel that they give you, right? And
Right.
so when your freshman year, you get introduced to all the things, 101 of, for me, it was the 101 of the Air Force, right? All Air Force basics, and learning about, our core values, integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do, right? Those are our three core values. So, really taking that to heart, and everything we did in Air Force ROTC kind of revolved around those. And those were at the focal point of every lesson, and every exercise, right? It was adhering to the core values. So, that's when I kind of mentioned earlier. That's when I realized that it was much more than just a way to kind of get around all this cool stuff. This is really like a whole. It's more than a lifestyle. I mean, it's like it's everything. It's you just come completely immersed in this culture that is the military.
Hmm.
And I think it's a little bit different for each branch because each branch has its own mission and function. But for me, I made some incredible friends. We went through a lot together. ROTC in itself is like doing another major.
Oh,
While
I'm
you're at college,
sure.
you devote an unbelievable amount of time to it, and you learn to wear the uniform, and you go walk around, and you have to hold yourself to a higher standard. You can't get in trouble. You can't get in trouble with the school, can't get in trouble with the law, can't really afford that because you'll lose your shot. And another thing about RTC is that it's actually really competitive. So
Hmm.
for me, the way it worked for us was in between our sophomore and junior year, we go to what was basically our boot camp, and that's kind of the final challenge, if you will, other than graduating. So the way it works is you do your freshman, sophomore year in ROTC, and you're being racked and stacked against your peers. So you're competing with your peers
Wow.
the entire time. And then, so the commander, he has a list of 1 through N, so however many cadets there are. So say there's 40 cadets, 1 through 40. And what happens is to go to field training, which is, again, that training in the summer. My year, they only took about 40%. Um, but up until then, they were weeding you out. So we started, I think, freshman year, we probably started around 65 cadets. By sophomore year, we were probably down to like, 50. And then by the time field training came around, we were probably down to like 45, right? So out of the
Wow.
45, there was a 40% selection rate to field training, which was, that's the final straw. And so basically, if you get a field training slot and you go through field training, and you come out the other side, basically all you have to do is, stay in good standing with your grades, don't get in trouble, graduate, and you're an officer. So,
Wow.
but yeah, it was highly competitive. So, the, I think going to your question, some of the bad, right? There's a lot of stress involved with that because you're stressed about, hey, this is my career. So very early on in college, you're like, you're banking on this. You said, I'm investing so much time, energy, and effort into this thing, and
Hmm.
hoping that it's going to work out because this is my life. This is what I'm choosing to do, um, not only right now, but for my future. So
Yeah.
for those who don't make it, they have to reevaluate everything. They have to say, okay, is my major still what I want to do? Because essentially, once you go to field training, you're locked into your major. It's very hard to change because the Air Force for me, the Air Force was counting on me to get my aerospace engineering degree, right? So there's a whole bunch of pressure all the way through to maintain good grades. There were standards, right, maintaining grades, and there was also fitness standards. So we had to
Hmm.
PT a lot, right? So we went through a lot of things that I don't think a typical college student has to go through, just because it is such a high bar to do what we were doing, and to commission and become an officer and everything. So again, it really taught me that yes, it is a means to surround yourself in things you're interested in, but it's much more than that. And I'm really thankful that it's much more than that because I really feel like it's also helped shape who I am. I owe a lot to Air Force ROTC and the Air Force in general, and I guess now the Space Force for doing that.
Wow. Yeah. I guess I didn't realize how competitive it was. I knew that there were a lot of things that you had to do in order to kind of maintain that status and work in that kind of organization, but I didn't realize how competitive that really was. And you mentioned field training. Tell me a little bit about that. What was that like?
Yeah, so field training, it wasn't that long. So I think normal boot camp for enlisted folks is like 12 weeks, and I think squadron officer school. So squadron officer school is another way to commission as an officer. Essentially, it's all 4 or 5 years of ROTC crammed into several weeks after people graduate college, which I think it's 6 to 8 weeks if I'm not mistaken. But for us, field training was only 4 weeks.
Oh,
So
wow.
two weeks were spent. Yeah, so 2 weeks were spent at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama, and then the other 2 weeks were spent at Camp Shelby, Mississippi. So and the reason they do only 4 weeks, right, is that because throughout our time in ROTC, we are getting all this extra training and everything. So it's kind of supplemented. But those
Hmm.
4 weeks were, basically boot camp. Everything, you see at boot camp. If you see TV shows or whatever about it. I think it's a little softer than what your traditional boot camp is, but it's still, people yelling at you, people challenging you. You don't know what's going to happen, that you don't have a schedule, that they're in control of your schedule. You don't have your phones or anything like that. So, it's from sun up to sundown. People are yelling at you, telling you exactly what you're going to do and all that. So, I think it goes back to the whole purpose of kind of tearing you down to build you back up.
Wow.
And that's really effective for some people. I think most people it's actually pretty effective, and some people I don't know if it's I mean, it's personality driven. I don't know if it's quite as effective on other people, but
Right.
for me, I really enjoyed it, and I
Hmm.
made a lot of really great friends. And that was you kind of separate yourself during that time. I don't. That's at least how it was for me. I kind of took those 4 weeks while I was there, and just kind of didn't really try to think too much about anything else, but just taking it 1 minute at a time, and focus on what I got to do next. So that's kind of what it was like.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when you're in that kind of situation and you don't have a schedule and you don't have a watch, that's really your only option. Otherwise, you're just gonna kind of go crazy. Like you really
Yeah.
just have to kind of take it minute by minute. So, and I can see how some people could do well with that and how that could be a more of a challenge for others. Um, I want to go back to one thing that you talked about earlier, and that's something that helped you get through your college experience, both your difficult major and the ROTC program, and that was you talking about the Baptist Collegiate Ministry. Actually, that
Yeah,
was a place where you met your wife, and
it is.
and so I wonder, in what ways were you able to grow and live into your faith while you were in college and in ROTC? through being involved in that campus ministry?
Yeah, so the Baptist Collegiate Ministry is a place on campus there. It's a ministry house. It's a no kidding actual house. Um, where people of like-minded faith. So for me, growing up going to First Baptist there in Cleveland, I associated myself as being Baptist. So the BCM was a place that I felt I could go and meet like-minded people, and so I did. I got really plugged in there. I was on leadership staff. I ended up living there. My last 4 years, so
Yeah.
4 of the 5 years I actually lived at the BCM, which was an incredible experience. Yeah, it was amazing. So, again, going back to being around people who were like-minded, and also just trying to figure out what they, how they were solid in their faith, and challenging each other in all of our faiths as we're going through these experiences, because everybody's dealing with stuff in college. So,
Mm.
um, iron sharpens iron, right? So we were facing these challenges together, and we would lean on each other, pray for each other. And then you mentioned I met Mallory, my wife, and that was, I think, the single greatest thing to come out of my time there at the BCM. So I met Mallory my freshman year. She was a junior and I was a freshman. So she was on leadership staff, and
Hmm.
we just clicked. I mean, really not much more than that. We just clicked, and she was amazing, and we pursued a friendship, and then that turned into obviously something much more. But again, it was just, and I owe that to the BCM, and I never would have met her without going there. And then same with a lot of my really very close friends that I made in college. Either so when I look back, and when the people I still talk to today, they're either ROTC people or BCM people.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was a place where I got plugged in. I found a church. So we had every Thursday night, we had worship services where a different pastor from a different church would come and kind of, give a message. And so that kind of it let a safe, comfortable place where you got exposed to a pastor.
Right.
And you kind of could use that as fuel and say, yeah, I want to go check out his church or their church or whatever. So I actually got plugged into a really well, it's not really small, but it's a pretty small church that was several miles away from Knoxville. Actually, it was about 35-minute drive.
Yeah. It was out in like Strawberry Plains, I think,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Strawberry Plains.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So Lions Creek Baptist was
Yeah.
what it was. But yeah, so Pastor Matt Giles, he came to TNT, and I was like, man, this guy is just incredible. And I went to the church, and it felt very homey, right? It was like all these older folks, and they welcomed you as like you were one of their grandkids, and
Yeah.
they actually had a pretty decent youth program. For high school, middle school, the college program, there was a few people, but there was some people at the BCM like me who obviously loved Matt's preaching, so we all kind of started going there together, and that's actually where I think starting my sophomore year of college, um, I went to church for the rest of my time in college, and it was amazing. I my old Sunday school teacher Brad, he and I still talk regularly. It was a really great place to meet really great people, and yeah, really my time at the BCM, and really my time in college, right? Because in college you get challenged, but
Hmm.
being able to have a safe kind of place where I could go and talk openly and freely, and really focus on my faith was crucial. So, keeping in the theme of being at college and being exposed to all kinds of different viewpoints and opinions and things, I definitely feel like my faith was challenged, but not in an unhealthy way. I think it was
Hmm.
very healthy, and I was able to form, very solid opinions about how I feel, I should live as a Christian, and how Christ lived, and again, I think it was just an amazing time to grow, honestly.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think when you go to school as large as UTK, you have to find that smaller group to plug yourself into. And you did a
absolutely.
great job of finding those little pockets. and it wasn't all the same thing. It was, you had your BCM group, you had your church group, you had your ROTC group. You did a good job of really making sure that everything was kind of being taken care of in a holistic way. Your faith, your career, aspirations, your schooling, even your physical fitness. You did a good job of finding a path for each of those things and outlets in smaller groups among this much larger university. And I think that's such an important thing because I think people can go there and feel lost.
Absolutely. And that's what I would say to any student, or any person who is looking at going to any university really, is, no matter the size, just get plugged in somewhere.
Mm,
And really, get out of it takes you a little bit to get out of your comfort zone, get out of your comfort zone. Even at the BCM, when I first went there, it was out of my comfort zone because it's all these different people from all over the country. And even though we all, identified as Baptist or Baptist leaning, we all kind of were different. So it took a little bit, and it was great. So I would very much encourage any student who's looking to go to college. First, don't be apprehensive about it. Definitely, you should go. If you feel led towards higher education, go full knowing that you are going to succeed, and that if you can plug yourself into smaller groups, it's going to be amazing because you'll know these people and you'll be able to rely on these people, and it just won't seem as daunting.
absolutely.
Kind of to your point.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things we have at the church where I serve. We have kind of the larger church. We've got three services, and it's easy to get lost in the shuffle. But we have Sunday school classes, and we have small groups to help kind of encourage that same thing of getting plugged in, so you're not kind of falling through the cracks, so you're not feeling out of place, so you have that community to kind of lean on. And so
Yeah,
I think that's just
exactly.
so important, especially in this day and age where we are just finding ourselves more and more distanced through social media or whatever. Finding that community is just really important. Um, well, I want to kind of move on to out of college because you've graduated and you're out now.
I have, yeah.
Um, and you went straight into the Air
five
Force,
years.
right? 5 years, yeah,
I
five
did.
five long years. But you went
Yeah,
straight into the Air Force
I did.
and you served in Texas first, right?
Yep. Yep. San
And
Antonio.
San Antonio, and you were there as an acquisitions officer. And I
Yep.
know you might be limited in what you can and cannot say for probably the rest of this episode, but tell me a little bit about what that was like, both living in San Antonio, Texas, and then also working as a acquisitions officer in the Air Force.
Yeah. So, kind of going back to God's plan's greater than ours, right? And you think you have a plan, but God really, His plan is the only one that counts. So, um, I got acquisitions as my career field, and acquisitions is basically very business heavy. Think, like a business degree, like an MBA or, something like that. That's essentially what I do. So I
Mm-hmm.
manage projects. So I manage, making sure that the Air Force has the latest and greatest technology that it can have so that, our warfighters, whether that's cyber guys, pilots, space operators, whoever, has exactly what they need to go out and be successful in their operational missions. So, what does that entail, right? That entails managing a team of financial experts,
Mm-hmm.
managing a team of contract experts that basically are the liaison between myself and contracting, companies like Lockheed, Raytheon, Boeing, all the big manufacturers. And then also I have engineers, and I have other folks. It takes a team to run a successful program or
Right.
project. So going through the process of identifying that you need to procure technology or a capability, And then so you have to do this whole, it's a very labor intensive and paper intensive process of going through and documenting everything, and coming up with requirements and talking to the actual warfighter and figuring out exactly what they need,
Mm.
and then going back and kind of turning their language into requirements that you can hold these companies accountable to. So when they provide you the product, you can, go back and say, is this exactly what, I asked for? Does this meet this? And you can kind of rate them on things.
Mm.
And then eventually transitioning that to the operational unit. That in a nutshell is kind of what my job entails. So yeah, like you said, I went to San Antonio straight out of college. I graduated in May, and then by the 1st of June, I was down in San Antonio um, at my first assignment, which was we were the acquisition support to a bunch of cyber operations down in San Antonio. So, for those who don't know, San Antonio has a whole bunch of cyber operational units, and cyber is a warfighting domain, what we call it. Basically, like the air, land, and sea are warfighting domains. Anywhere a war can be fought,
Mm.
cyberspace is considered one. Outer space is considered one. So, cyber operators are, no kidding, warfighters that are going to work every day to protect America's cyber um, capabilities, if you
Wow.
will. So, we were there to provide them all the tools and techniques necessary for them to do their job. So I did that for 3 years. I did, so when you go to a unit like an acquisitions unit, there's several different jobs you can fulfill even within the acquisition unit, right? So I did some pure acquisitions where I was in charge of a project of getting, some new capability, but I did some other core kind of military functions. I was the executive officer to my colonel. So the colonel was in charge of our whole, what's called a division. Our division was really big. We had approximately 1,200 people in our division, and he
Mm-hmm.
was the head guy in charge of all of it. He was
Wow.
the main guy in charge of all of the acquisition activities that went on in our division. So you're looking at billions of dollars that essentially he was the decision maker on. So, as his
Wow.
executive officer, I had the pleasure and the privilege to not only be mentored by him and see how he handled day in day out stressors of this huge task of
Mm.
jobs, but just also learning how to be a better officer in general. Yeah, it was a heck of an experience.
Yeah, I can imagine that being very like intimidating, but also
Yes,
very rewarding too.
it was very rewarding. It was very intimidating. Also, and every time we had visitors come, general officers, whoever, obviously they wanted to meet with the colonel, so facilitating that, controlling the colonel's calendar, right? So
Wow.
that's kind of the point of the executive officer, is to kind of be that buffer between the colonel and everything else, so that
Mm-hmm.
way he can focus on exactly what he needs to focus on, and you kind of take care of everything else. So I controlled his calendar, I controlled his travel schedule, I controlled basically his life at work. I was in charge of
Wow.
that. So again, that freed him up to make the decisions he needed to make. But um, concurrently, I was making a ton of important decisions that I was like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, should I be in charge of this kind of stuff?" Right? So, it
Yeah.
was it was pretty unique
Wow.
opportunity. So I was, I had the blessing to be able to go, and he was an incredible mentor. So I had a really great opportunity to work for him and with him.
Hmm.
And yeah, that actually, and so another um, benefit, I guess, of being the executive officer is that when you kind of get out of that job, it's a 1 year job usually. So because it's just so intensive. I mean, you're there before the colonel gets in, you're there after the colonel gets out, and it's even more intensive depending on if you're an executive officer for higher ups like general officers and stuff. I mean, the more responsibility, the more intense that job is. So,
Yeah.
um, but you get to kind of pick where you want to go next, right? So I got to pick my last. So I was there for 3 years and I had three different jobs. Um, so my last job after the exec, I got to do true program management. And again, I chose the job because of the person who was in charge of that section. He was just an incredible
Hmm.
officer, and I saw him as a really great mentor. So I went to work with him, and it was everything and more that I could have hoped it would have been. I mean, I learned so much from my career field, but also just learning, how to mentor people, and he taught me a whole lot. So that was. And then also, so in the midst of all of this, right, when I was in San Antonio, that's when Mallory and I got married.
Yeah.
So we went, I went my first year from living single down in San Antonio to having her there, and, us starting our lives together. And she was doing her teaching thing while I was, doing my Air Force thing. So we really, that was our first home together. So
Yeah.
um, I, I think very fondly of San Antonio as far as that goes.
Yeah, and she'd been teaching in Texas already. Not in San Antonio, but that was kind of cool for y'all to to start your life together in a new
Yeah.
place, the two of you. Um, I think that's just kind of a neat story. Um, what did you like about Texas? What was fun about San Antonio? I was never able to actually go visit you. That was when I was in seminary during those 3 years. um,
Yeah. Yeah. You were
so
busy.
yeah, and I was serving three churches, and it was a crazy time. But what did you enjoy about Texas? What was some
I,
of the things you enjoyed?
Yeah, I pretty much enjoyed everything about Texas. So San Antonio was a kind of a great, excuse me, kind of a great jumping off point, if you will, for my career. It was a bigger city. I think it's the seventh or eighth largest city in the country, even though it really doesn't feel like it when you're there.
Hmm.
It's so spread out. But it was much, much bigger than, obviously Cleveland, Tennessee,
Right.
and even Knoxville, Tennessee. So it was a great kind of medium size city to start, because now living in LA, right? It's massive.
Oh
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think if I would have gone from Knoxville to LA, I would have just been completely overwhelmed. So, but the food was great. I love Mexican food, and Tex-Mex is great, and the people were great, and I mean, it's still the South, so the Southern hospitality, and there was tons of cool things to do, different things to do than obviously growing up there with the mountains in East Tennessee. Texas, where I was at in San Antonio, is way different,
Hmm.
but it was still beautiful in its own right. So getting out, enjoying nature. Um, it was very, very hot at times. I did not really enjoy that, but I did enjoy the mild winters.
Hmm.
So living, in Texas for 3 years, and now for you know 2 years here in Los Angeles, I am a wimp when it comes to cold. I hate cold. So
Oh
yeah,
man, me too, me
um,
too.
yeah, it's it sucks. But yeah, no, Texas was great, and obviously, like you mentioned, Mallory was already teaching in Dallas, so I got to go to Dallas a whole lot, and I love Dallas as a city. So I think right now, right, she and I, we still talk very fondly about Texas and that state, and hopefully one day would like to end up there at some point. So
Yeah,
yeah,
very cool. I think it's interesting because I don't know if there are a lot of similarities between our jobs, but one similarity is that we move around and we itinerate. Um, we move from one place to another. Um, and so you served in Texas, and then as you mentioned, you've been serving in Los Angeles, California, and I actually did go visit you in LA this past summer. Um, but I think we had a really good time hanging out, going
yeah, we
seeing
did.
the sequoia trees, and going to the Dodgers game, and of course going to Disneyland. Um,
Yeah.
but were you ready to leave Texas when you went to LA? Uh, was that
It,
something you were kind of prepared for and ready to do?
from a career perspective, yes. From a personal life perspective, I was very comfortable with where I was at in San Antonio. We had a
Mm-hmm.
really great routine, loved where I lived. But so yes and no.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but as you mentioned, I've got to move. So every 3 to 4 years, we're required to move. We call it a permanent change of station, or PCS. So every 4 years, you get a PCS. Um, and yeah, it got close to the time when I was knew that I would be put in the cycle to, and that's how it works. It's a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
There's a team of people that figure out, where's the best location for you. But then there's also a kind of a roundabout way to kind of choose your own destiny. So um, you do like a by name request.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what happened to me. So one of my old coworkers actually from San Antonio got a job in Los Angeles, and it was out here at the Space and Missile Systems Center. And so when it was time for me to PCS, my boss, the one that last boss that I had, the one that was such a great mentor, he put some feelers out and said, "Hey, Aaron's due to PCS. Would anybody, be interested in potentially hiring him?" And this other person that I mentioned that I worked with said, "Yeah, I definitely would love to have Aaron come out here to Los Angeles and work for me." So they called me and contacted me and told me everything that they do out here. And keep in mind, in San Antonio, I was doing cyber stuff. So going back to the whole, um, my passion, right, for
Mm.
all things planes and rockets, right? Cyber was
Oh
nowhere
yeah.
in that plan.
Right.
So um, I grew to really enjoy the cyber job, and it's a very necessary area of work. But the opportunity to come out to LA and do cool space stuff, I mean, that was just, golden.
Oh
So
yeah.
capitalized on it. But it's funny because you looking back, you can see how everything led to where, you're at now. And so if I hadn't had that cyber time, I would not be where I'm at now, having this
Wow.
incredible space experience. So yeah, I moved out here to Los Angeles through that kind of special process. And the past 2 years have just been the greatest 2 years, I think, career wise, I could ever have hoped to have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember going to visit you, and we were driving around, and you said, "That's the building where I work. We can't go in there though. We can go into the
Yeah.
base next to it, but I can't take you inside the actual building," which I just thought was really cool. Kind of this top secret. Um,
And it sounds way cooler than it is. Trust me. If you went in there, you'd be like, "This is just an office. Like, what's the deal here?" I mean, it's really nothing special. It's just kind of the nature of how they do things around here.
yeah.
But in that same vein, when we got to drive around, I also showed you. So the way the base is set up, right? The base is next to the airport, and it's also surrounded by all of these different companies that produce all the satellites. So they, no
Right.
kidding, build all of our nation's, not all of them, but a lot of our nation's satellites right around the base there. And so when they're done building a satellite, they'll take it, put it on an airplane at LAX, and they'll fly it to, a different launch location depending on where it needs to go into orbit, and they'll launch it into space. So just kind of being surrounded
Wow.
by all that stuff is just so neat, right? Because I get to go from time to time, get to go to those companies, get to see what they're doing, get to, expose myself to the latest and greatest space technology, and it's so bizarre to think that all that happens right there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm loving it.
Are you able to collaborate with them at all?
Oh yeah, so that's again going back to that acquisition kind of cycle, right? So when we have a request or we have a need that we need to fill, and um, we put out a request for information or an RFI, and you have these companies that, it's always the same big companies that come back, and it's those companies that produce those satellites and everything, and they also all the time are, giving tours and stuff like that, because again, not just the Air Force or the Space Force, but NASA and
Mm-hmm.
NOAA and other people use these facilities to build their stuff. So yeah, we get to go check out that stuff a lot, and I think one of the coolest moments I've had being out here was when I got to go to SpaceX,
Mm.
and the guy I was meeting with, he was like, "Oh, I'll get you a space up front." And so he said, "Just pull up and give the guard your name." So I did that,
Wow.
and the guard was like, "Oh yeah, your space is this number or whatever." And I rolled up, and it was like the space right next to the front door, and it was distinguished visitor and everything
Oh
like
my
that. And I'm like,
gosh.
"Holy cow, I'm distinguished visitor at SpaceX." I just thought that was the coolest thing.
That's
So
amazing. Wow. That is so neat. You're talking about space. While you were serving there in LA, you found out that there'd be this new branch of the
yeah.
military, the Space Force. Tell me, kind of what has that whole process been like?
So, yeah, the Space Force, right? So, President Trump signed that into existence. I think that that has been an ongoing effort for several years,
Hmm.
behind the scenes, and I think it finally just kind of reached a head, and yeah, brought into existence. So the Space Force is kind of comparative to the Marines. So the Marines are still Department of the Navy, but they're their own force. They're the Marines, right? So it's the same thing with us. We're the Space Force, even though we fall under the Department of the Air Force. So technically, I am still an Air Force airman, but I am in the Space Force. And
Wow.
they're telling us that they have like it was a year and a half to figure out what the personnel transfer would look like.
Hmm.
But the end goal is to be released from the Air Force and, no kidding, just be a full fledged, Space Force officer, which I think from what we heard last, they're going to open that up towards the end of this year for us. So as soon as they give me the chance, I'm jumping ship and going over to the Space Force, because what that's
Wow.
going to enable is for me to stay in this kind of realm of all things space, which is again just amazing.
Absolutely, and it goes in line with what you studied, aerospace engineering. Um,
Exactly.
I think that just dovetails perfectly in what you're most interested in, and um, yeah, that'd be really awesome. I'm hoping that'll work out for you as soon as you get that opportunity to jump in on that. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, going to with that, man, it's like it's crazy to see how it all just kind of has lined up, and I really just feel like I've been put on a path, and I truly do feel like this is the Lord's will, at least right now to this point, and I'm just honestly just so thrilled with everything so far that I just feel so blessed.
Absolutely, man. I really hope they have space for you on the Space Force.
But
Pity laugh. Thank you.
you've always been good with words, Andrew.
um, well, that kind of leads me into kind of toward the end of our interview. One of the few last questions I want to ask you. How has serving in the military, now that you've served in a few different ways and a few different jobs, how has serving in the military impacted your faith? And in what ways has it maybe enhanced your faith? Or maybe what ways has it somehow challenged your faith as well?
Yeah, so definitely going back to that, that wingman concept, that total airman concept too. So the wingman concept, taking care of, your fellow wingmen and watching out for them. Very much, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, but also, as Jesus took care of his disciples, kind of thing. That's very much how I feel when I go to work and I look at all my counterparts and people I work with, just wanting to serve them. And yeah, even though technically I'm in charge of a group of guys and gals that we're all in this together, and
Mm,
we're doing one specific thing together. So how can I serve them to best have the best result possible? And I very much practice servanthood leadership, and that's something that I learned from my time as an exec, from my '06. He was very much the same way. So servanthood leadership for me is my style. So I feel like, um, you know, one of the things too, kind of going along with this theme is my, it's not always my plan, right? So
yeah.
I graduated with an engineering degree, but I didn't become an engineer. I became an acquisitions officer. Well, it turns out, that actually is a better fit for me with my personality. And I didn't get space, I got cyber, right? But the cyber job led into the most amazing space job, right? So
Right.
um, it's just the Lord's plan and trusting Him, and and who knows what's going to happen next, or who knows how it's all going to shake out. But I have faith, and that's one thing I think that's really strengthened, um, and truly just living my faith and
Mm,
trusting. That's something that's really grown in my time in the Air Force. And then going to the servanthood part of just serving the people I work with, and really coming from that mindset of just helping them any way possible and putting myself beneath them. And then also serving my wife, and she serves me, and we serve each other right through this, because this life is her life now too. And Mallory has been a champ through it all, through
mm,
the move, and she's worked at so many different schools in just a short amount of time because of my job. And I know that's been challenging for her, and uprooting our lives to
Yeah.
move around to different parts of the country and everything, but having each other. So I think that's really strengthened our relationship together, and ultimately, her and I just trusting that God's got a plan. Again, I think it's just been really great for that. Challenging though, it definitely has challenged, because you move to different parts of the country, right? So, for example, Los Angeles, we've had a pretty tough time finding that home,
Mm.
that church body home that we've been looking for. Not to like feed into the stereotype of LA. Like LA's got incredible people, and there are just so many options for churches. But for us, just where we feel called. But and I don't necessarily think that's an LA thing. I think that's just a moving around thing, and really
Sure.
trying to seek out your options, right? So, but I think the military has made that obviously a little more challenging, but it's still it's not something we can't overcome.
Right. I know you guys
But
tried a Methodist church here recently as well,
Yeah, we
which
did,
made
and
me
we
so
loved it.
happy personally.
Oh man, yeah, we really enjoyed it. So it's unfortunate that we're basically um, everything is shutting down out here right now because of this virus. Because
Yeah.
we really want to go back, but they're not having service right now. So
Right.
it is what it
Yeah.
is.
We've shut ours down as well. We're doing online services and yeah,
But
absolutely.
yeah, we're looking forward to going back to it. We just felt so welcomed, and again,
Mm.
going kind of back to that whole vibe I got when I went to Lions Creek back in college, right? Just smaller, but
Mm.
very intimate, very welcoming, very warm people. Just yeah, I feel like that's definitely a place we could make a home for the rest of the time we're out here in Los Angeles.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Well, all right. I got my last question for you. What is one thing you wish people could know when it comes to the military?
That um, underneath it all, right? So it talked about committing to the lifestyle, and really it's much more than just a job and a career. It really is a lifestyle.
Mm.
But underneath all of that, right? We are it's just normal, just like everybody else. And this sounds so pretentious, and I hate to say it like that, but like
No,
honestly,
no, no.
like Andrew, you and I, we've been best friends since we were 6, right? Like, and most of the time we've known each other, I've not been in the military. That's only
Yeah.
been recent years that I've been in that, and I'm still the same person, right? So,
Oh, absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
and we all of us in the military, we do our job because we feel called to do our job. I think most people in the military feel like that. I don't want to say all people, but I feel like most people in the military feel a calling to do this. Very much like, I feel like how you and everybody else who goes into ministry is called to be in ministry. And I totally think the same thing about teaching. After seeing my
Mm-hmm.
wife, I think you're called to certain things in life. Certain people are called to certain things, and I think most people in the military are called to this because um, you wouldn't be doing it for the money. We're not doing it for the money, and we're not
Right.
even though I talked a lot about all the cool stuff I get to do. I'm not doing it for like that cool stuff or anything. I'm doing it because I feel called to do it. And kind of going along to that service before self, and just being able to be part of something much bigger than you, and truly serving, your community, serving your country, serving your neighborhood, serving your friends, serving your coworkers. There's
Absolutely.
just something beautiful about that,
Yeah.
and at the end of the day, right? I guess people just need to know that that's what we're all about, is just serving and loving and caring for people.
Well said. Absolutely.
Yeah,
100% agree, man.
thanks.
Hey, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day, out of your busy schedule to sit down and talk to me, man.
Absolutely, Andrew. You're my best friend, bro. Love you, dude. Wouldn't
Love
do
you
it
too,
for anybody
man.
else. And I'm just
Love you
kidding. I
too.
do it for anybody who asks, but I'm really glad to do it for you.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for not asking about where the aliens are.
Well, that's another episode, maybe.
Yeah, we'll have to talk offline about that.
Good deal.
Just kidding. There aren't any. I do not know.
Right. Well,
All
thanks,
right.
man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Andrew.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Methodical Methodist Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, I hope you might consider heading on over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review of the show. It is very much appreciated. And until next time, stay methodical.